happen to think that the rise of the national populace has been extremely good for traditional Republicans. We don't try to pretend, which some organizations do, that they're middle of the road or above the fray or entire. I mean, we have these certain values. We like trade. Trade has increased prosperity in the United States enormously. It's a net benefit without question, not only to Americans, but to people all over the world. But China cheated.
Okay, so yeah, well, as you guys have already heard, this is the inaugural podcast of the Michigan Review. I'd like to thank Robert for coming here. It's going to be a great session, I think, and it's going to be very vital for all you guys to learn some new things. And yeah, so I was wondering if you could just introduce yourself and your background.
So thanks for having me. It's great to be on the Michigan campus. I love it here. I've walked all over campus this morning between 6 and 7:30, and it was good for my health, and it was good for my spirit. I'm Robert Doar. I'm the president of the American Enterprise Institute. I've been president for about 6 years. It's a Washington-based think tank. We have about 300 people, about 140 scholars. We participate in the public debate in various ways with research papers, books, op-eds, tweets. We're in the game on public policy in a big way. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I was someone who always wanted to work on poverty policy in the United States. And I did that for 20 years for Governor Pataki and Michael Bloomberg in New York City before coming to AI to lead a poverty studies group there 11 years ago. And then after 5 years of that, I was made president. The last thing I'll say about AI is we have a domestic policy, social, culture, and constitutional studies program. We have a foreign and defense policy team. And we have a very strong economics team. We allow our scholars to speak for themselves, but we hire them knowing that they see the world similarly to us with regard to a commitment to freedom, free enterprise, a limited government, a strong America role in the world, treating people as individuals, not as representatives of some class or race. And we love our country and we love the Constitution. So with those guiding principles, we hire them and we allow them to do their work. And because public policy in the United States is the result of a boisterous contention and debate, and if you want to move the debate in the direction you think is best for the future of your country, you have to be in the game, and that's what AEI is.
That's fantastic to hear. So yeah, I heard about the poverty policy thing, and is that what got you into wanting to work in public policy, or I guess how do you start out?
So I was born in Washington, D.C. At that point, my father was the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights in the Justice Department. He was a Republican who has kept on after the Kennedys came to town and through the Johnson administration. And being in that household, I was observant of someone who was engaged in participation in the public policy in a serious and effective way that led to positive change for our country and was inspiring and ennobling. And that led me to say, well, I like this world of public policy, and where's the area that I think in my generation and my time should be the focus? And I felt that it wasn't really civil rights anymore, but it was reducing material deprivation and increasing opportunity for people that start at the bottom through better economic and domestic and safety net policies. And so that's what got me into it. And when I was your age, I was looking for an opportunity to get into public policy in a way that allowed me to work on issues concerning the poorest Americans. And I did that. So yes, I was inspired by an example of public service that was tremendous and positive and good for our country. And I also think we've made great progress in reducing poverty in the United States. I think most people on both sides who really think about it acknowledge that. And I think the key to that is getting people to recognize that the interchange between the government and the citizen who is in need of help is a reciprocal relationship. We will help, but people need to help themselves too. And the key ways they help themselves is by getting into employment and by focusing on their family. And those were the principles that I stressed. And I think a focus on work and family as opposed to just government dependency and government assistance or people's inadequacy, but actually talking about people's potential as opposed to their liabilities, is much more successful in helping Americans move up and out of poverty.
It's extremely interesting, and I want to dig into that more because I know that you worked in New York as, I'm gonna read this off. You worked for New York State, New York City, as a commissioner of the Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance and the Human Resources Administration.
Yeah, these agencies have funny names.
Yeah.
The Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance is actually purposeful. It was a post-welfare reform messaging that said, if you're seeking government assistance, we want it to be temporary. If you're able-bodied, we want to help you while you get through this difficult time, but you're going to move on and be independent of government assistance, which is the way we think is best for you and best for our country, best for your family. So that agency was the social services agency for the state. And in New York State, I think it's different in Michigan, but in New York State, it's state oversight. So the state agency provides guidance, leadership, computer technology, training, and policy guidance, but the actual seeing a recipient and seeing someone in need happens at the local level, and that's in New York City. And the New York City agency, again, had a funny name. It was a vestige of the 1960s, the Human Resources Administration, the implication being that this social services agency was in charge of trying to maximize people's human resources and help them move up. Interesting thing about that was that the transformation in those offices in the post-welfare reform period under Mayor Giuliani and Governor Pataki and President Clinton and Mike Bloomberg actually had something else to do with names. The offices in the 5 boroughs that met people who were in need in the old days were called income maintenance centers. And the implication of that is that the government's role is to maintain your income, which is actually, I don't think, the right approach. And so we changed them to job centers. Okay. The government's role is to get you a job. And that's really the big debate in public assistance programs, is what is the role of government? Is it to help people get employed? Or is it to help people maintain their income through cash transfers? I think the maintaining income through cash transfers approach doesn't actually really help people in an important way. And helping people get a job while also supplementing those earnings with other forms of support that are called work supports, which can involve government transfers, is a much more effective way.
And then I think, is that the most impactful thing you think you did while working in New York, or do you have another?
Well, the
policy
transformation of welfare policy in New York City from 1990 to when we left at the end of the Bloomberg administration, where we brought work requirements to cash assistance, we increased emphasis on child support enforcement to get the absent parent to provide aid. We got labor force participation for never married mothers, went from 40% to over 65%. That was pretty dramatic. Child poverty dropped dramatically. And I think it's also important to point out that we spent more. But we spent it on supports for working people, not on sort of a cash entitlement to non-working people. And in getting those mostly single parents into work, we also, I think the statistics show that the children did better. They did better in school. They did better with regard to criminal justice involvement later in life. And that was because they were growing up in a household where the example of someone being engaged in employment and making an effort to be self-sufficient was a stronger and better example than the alternative.
Awesome. And so the last thing I will say on this is I think
I should just also say, if you don't mind, New York City changed in lots of other ways. We improved public security. We increased the availability of greater choice and options in education. We improved the business climate. We reduced taxes. We attracted and supported and celebrated an influx of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of recent immigrants to our country who invigorated whole neighborhoods. The city got a lot better. It's a great story. The comeback story of New York City from 1994 to into the 2013s is very good. It's gone backwards a little bit, but I still think it's a much stronger city than the one that I grew up in the 70s and 80s.
Do you think the most impactful part of that change was the poverty policy, or do you think it was
Well, it's hard. I
the
got
crime
colleagues
stuff?
over in the police department.
Yeah, that they would say
did.
otherwise.
They did a lot of things, and I got colleagues in the education people. The people in education, I think, they have the hardest challenge, and that was the one we were most frustrated by. The power of the teachers union is very powerful, and the status quo is very powerful in that world. I always used to think that they sometimes took on more than they would say, we're going to solve poverty through education. I would generally say that we're going to solve poverty through a variety of approaches: better public security, better schools, and better safety net policies. Let's all work together. But yeah, I think I'm very proud of our work.
Yeah,
I mean,
I was gonna.
the agency I ran was the third largest. So there's cops, teachers, and then safety net.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And we're all in this together. I think we made, again, labor force participation, big increase, child poverty, big decline. That's pretty good.
Right. And that's actually a great transition to my next question, because I think a lot of the people in this room, pretty much 90% want to work in government, and a lot of them are looking to federal. And so I think from such
Bad
a
idea.
Yeah,
Bad
yeah.
idea,
What's that?
bad idea. I think, again, I come from state and local.
Yeah,
I started in state government, and there are a lot more opportunities for leadership, a lot more opportunities to really make progress. Going to Washington is, if you like the glamour of the Hill, then I suppose you can like that. But to me, it just looks like a big maw of a bunch of people trying to
one up each other.
Yeah, and I think state and local is much more exciting, and I encourage people. My father used to always say, go and make your reputation out in the country, and then come to Washington in a leadership position where you've achieved some record of success. That's kind of the way I did it. They're also, that doesn't actually work in foreign and defense policy. If people want to work, they've got to come to Washington for that. There's just a lot of opportunities. The other thing for me was that I went in when Governor Pataki was elected after he beat Mario Cuomo. I was really interested in safety net policy, programs that concern the lowest income Americans, lowest income New Yorkers. I was 30, and the line for jobs for that type of work in a Republican administration is very short. And so that was an advantage. That's another thing my dad used to say. You zig when everyone else zags. Go where there's not as many people, and then you can maybe rise faster.
Right. And then do you think you made more of an impact, too, in the state policy, right? Because it's just so easy to rise to that leadership position?
Well, yeah, I've had a better runway. But I should also point out that I was both public policy interested, but I also was involved in politics. I worked on Governor Pataki's campaign for Senate, and I had worked on his campaign for governor. So I often tell young people who are really interested in schools like the Ford School, who do policy stuff, that's important. It's very important to be an expert in your particular field. But if you really want to have responsibility and leadership and actually have an ability to make decisions and lead your enterprise, being involved in politics helps too. And so I often say, find the topic or the problem in America that you think is the most interesting and also most compelling to you to work on, and then find a way to be an expert in that field, as well as find somebody in politics that you like and see if you together can make a difference.
Awesome. And so I think going from state politics to national, I'd really like to get your insight into the future of the conservative movement. And I think right now it's very fractured and it's very divided. And I guess what would be your method of outreach to bridging the gap between more like national conservatives and I guess traditional?
Well, first of all, recognize that in politics in America, it's always fractured and divided.
Of course.
It's the nature of our boisterous democracy and our boisterous. I mean, I'm reading a book about the 1790s and the divisions between the Federalists and the Republicans. Jefferson versus Hamilton were intense, and so that's not that unusual. Even within a conservative movement or among the liberal movement as well. I happen to think that the rise of the national populists has been extremely good for traditional Republicans. I think that there are 4 issues in which we were challenged in a way that we needed to be. And when I say we, I mean scholars who were traditionally associated with AEI. So one was immigration. As you know, as I mentioned before, we love immigration. We love a free flow of labor around the world. We think it's good for America, it's good for people, and it attracts the best and the brightest to come, and the hardest working, and it's been great for America. But we got blind to the fact that we didn't have a legal system that was working, and it was being abused, and it was causing great tension and difficulty in the country, and it was just wrong. The rule of law matters too. And I think that national populist drew a lot of support and anger at sort of people that were blind to that legitimately. The second is entitlements. We've talked about poverty policy, but we also have in the United States a variety of insurance programs and long-term sort of middle-class entitlement programs. Most prominent of these are Medicare and Social Security. I think Republicans, like former Speaker of the House Paul Ryan, needed to learn a lesson that when talking about, the fiscal strength of the country and sort of being kind of, I think, a little too quick to talk about reducing entitlements, they forgot that these are things that middle-class Americans paid into and believe they should have and have earned. And so we missed on that. And President Trump, of course, is not he hasn't until recently, but he's never been a big reducer in federal spending, and because he said, I'm never touching Medicare and Social Security, I see why that would be a position that would be attractive to working class Americans in the United States. The third is trade. We definitely, we like trade. Trade has increased prosperity in the United States enormously. It's a net benefit without question, not only to Americans, but to people all over the world. But China cheated, and China cheats. And took advantage of us. And we didn't see that or step up to that or face up to that legitimate concern. And there are some people in some industries, not so much because of China, but because of the rise of automation, who lost their jobs and fell behind. And we weren't conscious of them. So I think we needed to address that. And then finally, and I think probably most importantly, is America's involvement in the world. The post 9/11, I was in New York on 9/11, and I know the tragedy of that, and I believe that we needed to do something about that. But what ended up happening with the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan did not gain and earn the support and confidence of Americans, especially working class Americans whose sons and daughters served in the military. And that is, that's evidenced by the rhetoric of the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, whose favorite thing to say is, I went to Iraq and that didn't work out very well. That was a disaster. Now, he makes the mistake of saying, therefore, we shouldn't help Ukraine. And that's wrong, because they're not the same. A is not B. They're different. They're different circumstances, different situations. But that rhetoric is very attractive to working class Americans in the United States, because they recognize a very fundamental conservative principle, which we shouldn't forget, and that is the farther away you are from a problem, the harder it is to solve. Yeah. And the idea that we were going to, create, nation building in Iraq and Afghanistan is just silly. And so, that's, in my opinion, when you ask about debate, I think there's been a good play of different positions that's influenced the conservative side in a way, I would say, that was more positive than negative. And in fact, the pretty, not resounding, but pretty solid victory of President Trump was a victory of the right over whatever it is that's going on the left. Right. And that's the thing that sometimes, we people that are conservatives, we sometimes get all caught up in our little internecine battles with each other. But the real debate, the real challenge, the real discussion in America is between the right, limited government, strong America role in the world, basically freedom supporters, and the statist left. And that's what we have to focus on.
Going off the role in the world, so what do you think a strong role in the world looks like for America? Because I do think
Well,
the tides are changing quite
so
a bit.
one, it looks like a very strong national defense. We need to have, and AEI scholars are very strong on this. We have the best scholars who do the best work on making our national defense the best in the world and get better. So that's one. Two, I do think we need to support our allies
Yeah.
and oppose our adversaries.
Yeah. Of course.
China and Russia, Iran and North Korea are our adversaries. They see the world entirely differently than us. They don't believe in freedom. They don't believe in free speech. They don't believe in democracy. And they are belligerent players, or especially Russia, vis-a-vis their neighbors. And I think the United States should play a role in supporting our allies and protecting independent, free countries from the bullying tactics of China and Russia. And so I do think we should do that. That doesn't mean we need to do it all by ourselves or that we need to do it with American soldiers on the ground. But we can do a lot of things to support those types of situations and countries and peoples that we should. I think it's the right thing to do. I will say I'm a little bit of a minority on this. Often, the public policy debate on Ukraine centers on well, if we're not there, it's Europe next, and then us. This is a tumbling dominoes. That if we don't, we're really doing it for ourselves. And when I go out in the country and I talk to Americans about that, they're not buying that. They don't really see that as happening. And as hard as the supporters of Ukraine make that argument to appear to their self-interest, it's not working. I actually see it sort of differently. I view it as what Russia is doing in Ukraine is a crime against humanity.
Okay.
And if we have any moral strength or moral fiber as a country, we should stand against it in support of the Ukrainians.
Right.
Now, I think that's also has political weaknesses.
Yeah.
But I like my argument better because I think it's more true.
Does that moralist argument, does that extend to how you view other foreign policy thing, or is it situational?
Well,
is
you got to see with the different situations. Certainly, I think about it when I think about it in relation to Taiwan,
Yeah.
without question. Or South Korea. But and again, I know it's moral, but it's also just standing. I guess it is moral, standing up for the little guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And I think moving on from that, I do think, and I'm sure you'd agree, that the way to bridge any divide is open conversation and free speech. And I think students on campuses are feeling a pressure, no matter what their beliefs are, to keep their voices silent. And so how do you think that conservative students or whomever students can express more openly?
We are empirical. We are evidence-based. We talk about the facts. We're always civil, but we're not afraid to speak. So when I'm on campuses and I meet with people in your situation who bring this up, I always say, don't self-censor. Don't overstate your worry about being, having someone disagree with you or not invite you to their parties or look askance at you. I think that gets sometimes, I'm sorry, a little exaggerated by conservatives who say, oh, God, I'm afraid I might, say the wrong thing. I've noticed that when I go to some campuses, I always find that the freshmen say that. Yeah. And then at the same gathering, the junior and the senior, often a woman says, grow up. Yeah. Get over it. And in that, if you just, and the other thing that I'm very sad about, when I was in college and in high school, I was a newspaper editor, and I was the editor of the op-ed page, and I wrote opinion pieces. And I worry that today young people are afraid to write strong opinion pieces because they're afraid of it. They're a little careerist. Yeah. And I think that's ridiculous too. I once said the other day that no employer, a serious employer, no employer who you want to work for is going to not hire you because you wrote a strong piece, so long as it was civil and appropriate, but it took a strong position on trade or immigration or even something as controversial as Israel.
So you think it's just write your opinion, say what you think, and the right things will come to
Hang
you.
in there, but
Yeah.
be gentle, be calm, be appropriate.
course.
Have a sense of humor, have a little humility.
Yeah.
Acknowledge that maybe you don't see the whole thing exactly right, but here's what I think, and you'll find that I think that's better. I mean, this is a big university, University of Michigan, and I'm hoping that there's free discussions of ideas in classrooms and in afternoon conversations and bar rooms and all those things. And if there's not, that's a tragedy.
Yeah, I think that's a really good outlook on it for sure. And I think I did also want to move to conversations in dialogue that you've had. You've talked to senators, you talked to Vice President Pence on your podcast, I believe. What interaction or conversation do you think you've had with anyone? Do you think is the most insightful to you? And I know I'm putting you on the spot here a little bit.
Well, we have a lot of great scholars at AEI. I mean, I encourage you to read Yuval Levin and read Matt Continetti and read Michael Strain and read Corey Shockey. I've learned a tremendous amount. One of the things that you need to understand is I was a social safety net expert. I was a government administrator. And now I'm the president of a think tank, which has got very broad responsibilities and big time PhD scholars. And I did that when I accepted that responsibility when I was 58. That was stretching. That was forcing myself to get outside of my narrow world and learn and listen. And I've learned just a tremendous amount from the scholars at AEI. And so my podcast focuses only on AEI scholars. I've done a few exceptions. I had Mike Pence. And I've done lots of dialogues with people over the years in interesting circumstances, and I've loved all of them. But I think that if you go to our website and really absorb it on the topics you're interested in, and maybe topics that are a little outside of your realm, you'll learn a lot, and I've learned a lot from them. Yuval Levin gave a speech this past week down at the Baker School at the University of Tennessee about why our Constitution is the solution, not the problem, to our division in America. I strongly urge you to read that. We've posted it. We have the video of it and a transcript of it. It really, and especially as we're coming up on our 250th anniversary as a country, it's time to reacquaint ourselves with our founding principles and our founding documents that set up the process by which we resolve differences in a very diverse, pluralistic society. The Constitution is brilliant with regard to that. And it's about how we, while not agreeing, find a way to act together. And we've done that. It takes us a long time. It's frustrating. It's difficult. But it works. And it has worked to earn the respect and affection of people all over the world that have studied it. And I think we need to be reminded of that. I mean, one of my favorite statistics that one of our scholars has put out is Rui Teixeira, who studies working class Americans. And he found that if you ask Hispanic Americans, is the United States the greatest country in the history of the world? 75% say yes.
Wow.
If you ask self-identified Democrats, only 25% say yes. Now that reflects why Hispanic Americans may be saying, do I really want to be part of the Democratic Party that doesn't see my own country the way I see it? But it also reflects that we have earned I mean, it's a 250-year story, and it's all in all, when you look at the long story, it's very positive.
Do you view AEI as kind of a microcosm then of because there's so much open dialogue within it, like, or is it like almost the ideal of what you'd want America to be like?
Well, no, because AEI is just a player in the bigger world. We are unapologetically right of center. So we don't try to pretend, which some organizations do, that they're middle of the road or above the fray or entire. I mean, we have these certain values. But we do think that, in allowing our scholars to say and speak what they want, we set the right way to run a think tank. Others do it differently. Some people have a very top-down. This is a one position. Everybody should, but we don't do that.
So do you view AI and think things like AI as just players and in liberal think tanks as well, and and all this are just players in the web that is American
Well,
politics?
there's no think tank like AEI.
Yeah, fair enough, fair enough.
We're unique, sui generis. We're the best.
True, true.
Uh, yeah, but no, we started out with is I view all of us, you guys, your students here, faculty here, citizens in Michigan, citizens in New York and California and Missouri, all over the country, as all participants in a boisterous democracy that has a constitution that allows us to work out those differences over time in a way that, and we got to make sure that we stick with those processes in working out. The real worry I have is that we break away from relying on certain constitutional principles, the role of the courts, the role of the executive branch, the role of Congress, and we don't get them operating in the correct fashion, or we break them. And that would be really a tragedy, and AI is focused on not letting that happen.
And then I think the last question is obviously a great jumping off point. I think a lot of the students in here today are interested in the work that AI does and how they can maybe even get involved with it.
Yes.
And so I think if you
We're
wanna
all
talk
for that.
about
So we are a really young place. We have many, many young people. We have a recent graduate here with me today who works at AEI and is doing a great job. We have a summer honors program. We have a campus involvement program run by our academic programs team. And you can look at our website and find how to be involved in that. And then we have internships where we pay a stipend. It's pretty generous, and the internships are beloved by people that get them. And internships are tricky because not everyone works out perfectly, but it's a summer in Washington. Yeah. We have fall and spring, so we have 3 terms. And then we have research assistants, which are recent college graduates who come and work for our scholars for 2 or 3 years as research assistants. So we're really a place that's open and benefits greatly from the input and support and work of young people who are involved with us. And so I strongly urge people interested in public policy to get involved in those various opportunities and apply to them. We had a wonderful University of Michigan student in our summer honors program last year. He had a great time. I'm sure there were others. So it's a great place for young people, but also it's a great source for young people who are doing research on any major public policy issue. Okay. And we produce a daily AEI Today and AEI This Week, and if you know us and recognize us, if we're omnipresent. We're in the Economist, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, CNN, CNBC, Fox. We're all over the place. And I urge students at the University of Michigan and other places to pay attention because we're putting out good stuff.
Okay. So one of the questions that one of the students here asked was, what do you think, and this is kind of just for professional development,
Okay.
is the biggest thing people miss when communicating professionally, like emails, briefings, in your eyes? Like I guess what's a good email to you?
Well, it spells my name correctly.
Yeah.
It's friendly, warm, to the point. You are onto something here in that the world is changing in all kinds of ways, but written communication is still really key. Mm-hmm. And if you can, write in a succinct, brief way that gets your point across and also expresses some warmth and friendliness, you're going to succeed. If you have trouble with that, then you're not going to succeed. And the other thing is it's not the actual act of communicating, doing the thing correctly, but it's doing it. Yeah, some people don't communicate. Some people are afraid to communicate. They don't share. They don't volunteer. They just hold back, and that's definitely a mistake. So it's often what I say to people is, if you've got something to say it.
As an aside, with like the rise of AI and ChatGPT and everything, are you able to tell when someone uses it for, I mean, not even an email,
I'm
but
just picking up that now a little bit, and
yeah.
I'm sensing it, but I haven't had that much experience with it.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. It's, yeah, crazy changing world. Another question student asked was what your opinion is, and we were talking about this, I guess, a little bit earlier, but on the current U.S. tariff policy, and how do you think this policy will impact poverty rates across the U.S.?
Well, so the tariff policies are, I don't think, going to be successful at increasing the number of manufacturing jobs in the United States, which is one of the goals. I don't know that it'll even really impact the trade deficit. I think it will increase costs to working class and struggling Americans, and to the extent that the inflation-adjusted cost of living rises, that often harms the people at the bottom the most. And so I would be very concerned about that. It's just a fact that some of the things that have been made successfully by producers overseas, including in China, are things that are basic necessities for struggling Americans. Clothing for their children, sneakers, socks. People make fun of those things as being unimportant, but to a person who has limited finances, these are important expenses. And to the extent that they're far less expensive than they would otherwise be, that's a good thing. They have more money for other things, rent and books and other things. So I'm worried about the negative consequences of the extremely high tariffs on, and this is the irony, on the very people that national populists and President Trump are trying to help.
Right.
And but we have to watch it. We have to document it. We have to study it. And then make sure and bring it to the country's attention. I do have some faith that if it is going badly with regard to those things, if unemployment rises and inflation doesn't remain stubbornly high, the Trump administration will change course, and that would be probably a good thing.
Is that, do you think the problem that the tariffs, like, that America needs to manufacture more, do you think that is a necessary?
So let me be clear about this. This is a very important point for all of our listeners to understand. We manufacture a lot. Right. In dollar and in quantity, we manufacture a great deal. We do it with fewer workers. Okay. So the number of workers has declined, but the productivity has gone up and the actual production has gone up. So I hate it when people say we don't make things anymore. We don't make sneakers anymore. We don't make some things, but we make some very sophisticated equipment. The company that is struggling now because of the tariffs, Caterpillar or Deere, these are big Midwestern manufacturers that have made marvelous pieces of equipment that are traded all over the world. And we make them in the United States, and there are thousands of examples of our ability to produce quite a lot. We just do it with fewer workers. So that's the transformation that's happened. It's a big transformation. It's a problematic one. It's put people who want to work in manufacturing at having to struggle to find opportunities. But it's not about not making more. We make lots. We just don't make it with as many workers.
That's a super interesting outlook. I hadn't thought about it that way. That's very interesting. And I guess that so another question someone asked, what foreign policy issue do you think is most important to you? And yes, like what do you think is the most pressing issue facing the world today? I guess I don't even.
So we mentioned this already. The one I'm focused on the most, and AI does quite a lot of work. We have something called the Critical Threats Projects that documents the war in Ukraine on a daily basis. That to me is the most pressing thing. There's a war going on in Europe, and I'm watching that very closely, and that's what I'm most. My son is a first lieutenant in the United States Army. He spent 9 months in Germany training Ukrainian soldiers. Oh, wow. So that's a conflict that's very hot, very pressing, very troubling right now, and I watch that probably the most closely. The whole competition with China is, of course, huge, and it's going to have implications for many years to come, and it may be sort of, when we think about it, even bigger, but they're related. But those are the two: China's role in the world and Russia's invasion of Ukraine are the two foreign policy issues that I'm most focused on.
Okay. Is a what? How do you think we find resolution in Ukraine?
Well, so I look at it as President Kennedy said, a long twilight struggle with Russia, and we've made a lot of progress. If you look at the map of Europe in 1960 or 1970 or 1980, it's entirely different and much better for the cause of freedom and independence and self-determination. But Ukraine is sort of the last frontier, and we're losing there. So I would be willing to accept an end of the war and an armistice of sorts without having Ukraine have to give up its long-term desire to reclaim its full territory. But and then pause and plan to fight another day, or plan to win back that territory through peaceful methods, negotiation and diplomacy. And that's what I would like to see right now. I think it's unrealistic to not think that the odds with Russia so much bigger, so many more people, and a willingness to sacrifice in a crazy way. And Ukraine has a similar desire to fight, but they're just not as big. Right. And I do think that it's certainly true that that the introduction of European troops into Ukraine could be very destabilizing and could cause a consequence. So I think I'm trying to find a way to pause it, and then, but not give up your goals in the long term.
Do you think Ukraine should be open to giving up any territory? Or
not any more than they've already had to get. Russia's already no, terrible. That would be horrible.
And then I think, obviously, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, what domestic issue do you think is most important to you as well?
Well, our federal government commitments and spending are greater than our willingness to raise revenue to pay for those commitments. And I think long term, the debt and deficit issue is the one that we haven't really faced up to. And we're getting, it hasn't hit yet, but when it does, we're going to have to really step up and make some changes that calibrate our resources that we take in with what we really are willing to spend. That is, I think, domestically the biggest issue that's coming at us. It's going to be a real issue for your generation. Yeah. But that's the one I'm most focused on.
By cutting the deficit spending, what do you cut?
So I think there are some ways to increase revenue through consumption taxes that could have some benefit to the fiscal situation in the United States. And I do think there are some changes in the algorithms associated with Social Security that might save some money. Okay. And then finally, I think the biggest one is health care. Yeah. So Medicaid, and I do think that sort of not well-known story of the recent recent tax policy discussion and the One Big Beautiful Bill is that they did make some efforts to get Medicaid spending under control, and I think there may be some positive outcome of that, and that's a good thing. And it isn't about throwing people off the benefit, but it's making sure people are properly determined, are eligible, and if they can work, that we actually encourage them to work, so that they can perhaps make some contribution to the cost of their health care, which they're not now. And so just to give you an idea, I'm a safety net person. So in New York City, when I was there, and these numbers are different, but they're the same in terms of proportion, we spend for health care programs, Medicaid, for the poor in New York City, $30 billion, state, federal, local. We spent less than $500 million on child care. Wow. We spent less than $1 billion on food assistance, and less than $500 million on employment services, helping people get jobs. Well, that makes no sense.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just completely disproportionate. And as you can see in sort of the power dynamic, when I would testify before the state legislature, if we were talking about Medicaid, it would be me and the most powerful lobbyist in the state. If I testified on child care for the poor or food assistance, it would be me and, scruffy advocates.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show you that something was going on there in maximizing the expenditure for health care in a way that might not have been actually the right outcome.
It's also super interesting that New York was definitely a smaller example of what's happening overall in the country.
Oh, it's definitely not unusual. New York is the worst. New York is worse in those statistics, no question, because we had a very powerful healthcare industry that was going to get every last dime they could for their world through the Medicaid program.
Awesome. That's all the questions we have.
Okay. Great.
Thank you
Thanks
again
for
so
having
much for
me.
coming.
I've
Thank you,
enjoyed this. I
audience,
hope
for
the
coming.
podcast comes out okay. We have an audience here. We don't
Yeah.
often do podcasts before a live audience.
Crazy.
And I hope when we close this down, we can take questions from them if they have any.
Of course. And Jeffrey, thank you so much for helping set up as well.
Nothing.
That's all we have. That's all
All
we
right.
have. Awesome. Thank you so much again.
All right.